We bring out our good friend Mike McAllister to talk Cuse football and basketball. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're good. We're going to start basketball just because it's a little bit more positive, and we've been talking about basketball for the last half hour. So let's start basketball with you today. And this Delaware State game, it went very similarly to what we saw against Binghamton, right? It was a team that they should blow out. They did blow out. Aside from that, taking care of business, what stood out to you? What were your takeaways from that game?
The fact that they put together another 40-minute defensive performance on top of what they did in the opener. You know, it's one thing, especially coming after the final exhibition game where it wasn't from an energy, effort, et cetera standpoint, and even Coach Red said this after that game against Pace, it wasn't up to what they expected. And so your next game immediately after that, to come out and have that level of effort and energy is great, but you want to see it consistently before you start to say, okay, that's what this team is. So to see that again, I thought was a very encouraging sign, and I think they might actually be number one in the country in points per game allowed or something like that. They're right up there for certainly. And that's a pretty far cry from what we saw last year against similar type of teams.
Do you think this defense is capable of, from what you've seen, does this translate to Power 4 basketball defense?
I think so, just because of how long they are basically everywhere. And even when they bring in guys off the bench, they're still really long. And I think that can be disruptive and really give teams fits. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm expecting every Power 4 team that they're going to play is going to shoot 20% and score in the 40s. Like, I don't think expecting that level of defense every single game is probably not realistic. But can they be a really good defensive team and give Power 4 power conference teams a lot of fits? I think the potential is there to do so, but they've got to continue to show that energy, effort, and cohesiveness on that end of the floor.
And I think that's one big difference from last year to this year, right, Mike? Because last year, if they didn't shoot well or if they offensively were having an off night, then they were cooked, right? But this year, you hope that, as the saying goes, defense travels. They had, 25 points off turnovers against Delaware State, forced more than 20 turnovers against Binghamton in the opener. Are they going to do that against Power 4 opponents? Probably not. But, your defense can travel to the point where maybe if you're having an off night shooting, maybe this team is capable of staying in it defensively.
Yeah, the ability to win multiple ways is so significant when you're trying to become a tournament team, right? It's not just about, well, how good are you with this? How good are you with that? It's also about, how can you find different ways to win? Can you win in an up-tempo, high-scoring game where both offenses are clicking? Can you win a game where your offense is not shooting the ball well, not performing well in the half court, and maybe it's a little bit of a lower-scoring game? But also, in those games where your offense is struggling, one way to help mitigate that is by getting those transition opportunities. And if your defense is still good and is forcing turnovers, then you're going to have an opportunity to get some easy buckets, which obviously helps when your half-court offense isn't performing well. So, yeah, it gives the team, we've talked about the versatility, especially defensively with being able to switch, but just versatility as a team as a whole to be able to win in a variety of different ways is something we haven't seen from this team in at least several years.
Are you at the point where you're worrying about Nate Kings yet?
No, because I know he's a good shooter. I think he'll be okay. And he is doing some other things, like he's still playing well defensively, and I've seen him put the ball on the floor a little bit. I think if you continue to get him open looks, the shooting will come around. I'm not too concerned about it yet until I see, you start getting 6, 7, 8 games into the season, and he's still struggling to hit wide open shots. And, then at that point I might start to be concerned. But 2 games, no, because reality is if he's shooting 40+% on the season and then has a 2-game stretch in the middle of January where he doesn't shoot well, no one's really all that concerned about it. So I'm not going to overreact to it just because it's at the beginning of the season.
We brought up Kenne Anthony a little bit earlier in the show, and I said this injury to J.J. Starling may be a blessing in disguise in that, A, it's not serious, B, it's allowed Kiyan some more minutes here while JJ sits out some of these non-conference games. And I think, we're seeing that Kiyan is making a smooth transition from high school to college. And, maybe that transition will be expedited a little bit in terms of getting his feet wet and feeling comfortable with JJ out. And what have you seen from Kiyan? And I guess, we knew he could score. What has impressed you most, though, about his game to this point?
He's better and more polished, seemingly more ready for the college game than what I thought he would be right away. I think where he is right about now with just, being able to score and how smooth he is offensively and all that, I thought we'd see flashes of that. I didn't know that we'd see it as consistently as we have in the first two games. He's shooting a really high percentage. He's not forcing it either. We know he can score. We know he can shoot. But he's not taking 25 shots and not playing within the team and playing within their system. He's sharing the ball. He is a better ball handler than what I gave him credit for coming out of high school. He's just a really polished player. You can see growing up around the game and all the training that he did with his dad. You can see all of that paying off. It's been extremely impressive and just, again, a really cool story. Every time he has, a solid performance, these first couple of games, all of these huge basketball social media accounts are posting about it, right? The Ball is Life and the Bleacher Report Hoops and all things like that are posting about it, and that is good for NIL situations. That's good for Syracuse basketball in terms of its brand recognition. All of that stuff in modern day all means something, and he is certainly deserved of that praise so far.
Yeah, Syracuse is second, by the way, in points per game, just ahead of Clemson right now. But they're also 326 in free throw shooting. Are you worried about that? And man, I don't know if you've seen both centers' free throw form, but woof.
Yeah, not great, but at the same time, Syracuse seems to have some of its best teams when it's not a great free throw shooting team. So, they were a good free throw shooting team last year at times. So the fact that you might take a little bit of a step back in terms of what you gain elsewhere, I think is a positive. Now, Donnie Freeman, I think, is going to be better at the free throw line as the season goes along. And obviously you want some of those guards as the guys that are taking it, but And Kiyan had a poor day, the other day at the free throw line. He even said that was unacceptable, the way that he shot the ball from the charity stripe. But yeah, you're just hoping if those bigs can shoot, somewhere around 60% from the free throw line, then you feel like overall the team will end up being okay there.
You mentioned Donnie Freeman. I can't remember a kid from freshman year to sophomore year looking more like a leader and, making it like, tell me if you agree with me. Like, Donnie Freeman has made this his team this year.
Yeah, it's not just that he's better, because he is. We're seeing it. We saw the flashes of it last year, but we're seeing it more consistently this year. On top of that, we're seeing him healthy, I think, which helps as well. But to your point, he seems to be someone who is, talking to everybody in the huddle and is demanding the ball when they need a big bucket and being aggressive and not just sort of, I'm here, but it's not really my team, so I'll help out any way I can. He's being very assertive, but not out of control with that assertiveness. It's been extremely impressive through two games, and if he's able to maintain that all year long, along with Kiyan's development, you get JJ back, you see the athleticism at every position. I think they've got a chance to be pretty good. I'm really curious to see what they do in this game against Drexel. That's kind of on the road, first game away from the Dome, and then what they do when they start getting into the Houstons and the Kansases and start seeing, some of those type of teams, how they perform in those games.
I'm glad you brought up Donnie Freeman, Paulie, because we were more than 5 minutes in and we still hadn't brought up Donnie Freeman, who's, arguably the best player on this team. I think he is the best player on this team and just went out and, he's done anything he's wanted to do in these two regular season games. You brought up Drexel, Mike. They are coming off an 11-point loss to St. Joseph's. They've got Colgate tomorrow night before playing Syracuse in that neutral site game. Do you have any concern over this Drexel squad? You mentioned it's down there in Philly, not a true home game for either side, but certainly in their hometown. Is this a tricky game for the Orange, or do you expect them to come out and win by double figures again?
I think if Syracuse plays its the way that it's played in the first two games, then they'll win the game somewhat comfortably. But you never know when a team travels how they're going to react to that, right? Not being at home, how they're going to react to, being in a different locker room, being in an environment where the entire crowd is not on their side, even though I do expect there'll be a lot of Syracuse fans there. So it's going to be different, and we don't know how they're going to react to it. Now, I think there's enough guys that have sort of been there, done that, and been in a lot of hostile environments. Nate George, William Kyle, even Donnie Freeman last year, and JJ, et cetera. I would think that they'll be okay from that standpoint, but the reality is we don't know. We haven't seen this team together face those type of challenges. So I'm curious to see how they react. I certainly think it's a game that they could lose if they're not focused and sort of come with the same approach as they did against Pace, for example. But if they come with that same approach that they've had the last two games, if the effort and energy is there consistently all 40 minutes defensively, it's a game I think we're going to feel like they're in control the entire way.
You mentioned William Kyle there, too. Do you think what he's doing is also translates to Power 4? I mean, if he filled up the stat sheet on Saturday, 13 rebounds, 4 assists, 6 blocks, 1 steal. He's been crazy on the defensive end.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I expect him to average 6 blocks a game against power conference teams, but I think his style of play with the effort that he gives you every single possession, with his athleticism, he has excellent defensive footwork. I think people should watch him when you're watching Syracuse play defense and watch the way that he switches, that he rolls with players to the rim, that he helps backside, all those types of things. His footwork is excellent. That definitely translates. Now, oftentimes when you get to the power conference level, you're going to get bigs that are bigger, have a little bit more girth to them, and maybe have a size advantage on him, which is certainly going to make it more of a challenge. But his ability to run the floor, his athleticism, and his footwork, I think he's going to still be an impactful player on the defensive end. And they're not looking to throw the ball into him in the post offensively and let him go to work like they did with Lampkin last year. He's going to get the bulk of his points on lobs and transition opportunities and putbacks and things like that.
All right,
that's
Mike,
going to continue in conference play.
Girth and gumption.
Yes. This team's got both, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk some football now. We've got listen. I've got some big picture questions that I want to ask you, but let's just start with: is there anything from that game on Saturday down in Miami that you want to touch on first before we get to the big picture stuff?
It's another game where it feels like if they had Steve Angeli, that they might have won. I'm not saying they would have won, but it felt like a game defensively that was kind of going similar to the way it did in the first half against Clemson, that they were getting off the field and Miami was getting frustrated offensively, and their offense just couldn't play complementary football. It felt like if you had Angeli, that was a game ripe for taking control early. And given everything that had been discussed leading up to that game, what would Miami's mentality be going into the game, given that it felt like everything that was they had set for goals for themselves in the preseason was seemingly off the table? College football playoff, I guess not entirely, but it's going to take a ton of help to get there. And so it felt like if Syracuse had a representative offense that could have put a couple of scores on the board early, what would Miami's mentality have been? How would they have been able to respond to that? I don't know, but just unfortunate that they don't have anything from the quarterback position that allows them to do that. So I still feel like that they had talent to be competitive basically everywhere else with that team, and it's just unfortunate that the end result was what it was and didn't showcase that.
Who do you think starts the game at Notre Dame?
I still feel like it's going to be Ricky Collins, but, I mean, who knows? It could be anything. I mean, it's crazy to me when you have a passing offense that results in a guy who comes in and catches 2 passes in garbage time as a true freshman ends up being your leading receiver with 22 receiving yards. That your starting quarterback who threw the ball a bunch during the 20 plus times during the game ends up with less than 100 yards of passing offense. I mean, that you can't win games now that way unless you're running a Navy style triple option or something like that. It's just not the way that it's going to work at this level. And, it's just unfortunate because, again, it feels like Syracuse has a good football team that is not looking like a good football team because of one injury.
Mike, do you think the backup quarterback on next year's team is on this roster? Like the true number 2 next year behind Angeli. Is he on this roster right now?
Man, it's so hard. I want to say no, but I also think about you've got Angeli on the roster. So how easy is it to go grab somebody from the transfer portal to say, hey, we know that you weren't happy starting at your other place, so come be happy not starting here. It's the situation where you get 2 former highly regarded recruits from power conference teams like Steve Angeli and Ricky Collins to both transfer to you in the same offseason is not something that is going to happen most years. And especially now when you only have one transfer window.
What is the high school? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and getting someone from high school that's highly rated, yeah, you love that for the future, but I think it's real tough to rely on a true freshman because you just don't know how ready they're going to be. And we don't know how these guys that are currently there now as freshmen are going to be as sophomores. You hope that there's an off season of development there, and they will be. But it's tough to get someone, I think, that's good enough to be your backup and win from the portal. And a lot of it is just going to be a giant question mark, I think, for the moment, unfortunately.
You were going to say something, Paulie?
That was what I was.
That was your
say.
question.
The high school question.
All right. So, just from a recruiting standpoint, in this day and age, you got to recruit your current players back to your roster. We heard over the weekend that Demetrius Samuel says he's coming back. Calvin Russell was at the game along with recent commit Tredarius Hughes. I guess, how impressive is it that Fran has still been able to bring in top talent, given that what's happened this year, and going back to Demetrius Samuel, how important is it to get that guy back on the roster?
Oh, it's huge to get him back. There's no question because he was one of your highest rated recruits in last year's recruiting class. He has shown that he was every bit worth the hype of his high rating, and to have him, to play him right away, showcase how good he is, one of the highest graded corners in the country, regardless of class, when you start looking at these analytics and PFF grades and things like that. To keep that guy on your roster, I think, does a couple of things. One, obviously, it's great to have a talented player in your secondary. Two, I think it tells you from an NIL perspective that Syracuse isn't bottom of the barrel, barely scraping by, getting these guys, pennies compared to what other schools can offer. Because if they were, I don't think that a lot of those types of guys would stay. Now, of course, if a school like a Texas or whatever wants to significantly overpay, we'll think about Murad Watson last year, and try to entice a guy to leave, then, of course, that's going to be a tough situation for a lot of schools. But I think the fact that you keep him sends a positive message. The fact that those guys are seeing what's going on this season, you would hope that when they have conversations with the Syracuse coaches are pointing out the fact that if we had Steve Angeli, we might be a 7 or 8 win football team this year. That's really been the major issue. Look at the game against Pitt, how well our defense played. We basically shut Miami out for an entire half at their place. You start talking about some of those things and pointing out we haven't been able to play complementary football. We're getting Angeli back next year, and we're going to do everything we can in the offseason to try to make sure we have at least a couple of other guys that we feel comfortable playing so that if he does go down again, we're not in the same situation.
All right, Mike, great stuff as always. We'll see you on the TV side of things tonight.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Mike McAllister joining us here as he does every Monday. And, again, if you want to watch him on Channel 9 tonight, 7 to 7:30, we've got, even though it's a bye week, we still have the show tonight. We'll take a time out.
You know where else you can see that, Steve? You want to plug that, too?
Sure. So we're starting our new WSYR Plus show today. It's called Orange Nation Overtime. It'll air from 4:30 to 5 o'clock every weekday. Generally, we'll take one of our interviews from this show, and then Paulie and I will add some commentary to it on both sides. So that Mike McAllister interview we just did, that'll be on WSYR Plus Orange Nation overtime later this evening, 4:30 to 5 o'clock.
That's why I actually asked questions in that interview.
I noticed you kind of came alive, and I like that.
You can't have me on an app just sitting there staring at my own computer.
I like it. See, you are capable. You are capable. That just means, does that just mean you're lazy the other times, or?
Yeah, I'm not needed. I save my energy for the stuff that's important.
All right. We got to get to our check